Thanks for joining us today, where we discuss the darker side of history. Because when history remains a mystery, we are bound to repeat it.
So today we're going to be talking about the little Albert experiment.
This one is a doozy.
It is. So the little Albert experiment is based off of a Russian scientist or psychologist, I believe, Ivan Pavlov's experiment on behavioral conditioning in dogs. But they kind of took it a step further and decided to try to see if you could emotionally condition behaviors into people.
You might have heard of Pavlov's dog. It was an experiment conducted to see if you could train a dog to respond to certain sounds, like a bell. And the dog would get used to the sound of the bell. And every time he heard that bell, he knew to expect a treat. Every time he heard the bell, he was ready for a treat.
Yeah. This one, however, was conducted to see if you can socially condition fear into people, if fear was a learned trait, or if people were just inherently afraid of stuff. Yeah. So you ready to get into it?
Let's do it.
Okay. So, a doctor named John Watson, he was a behavioralist, and a graduate student named Rosalind Rayner conducted an experiment on a 9-month-old child who they dubbed Albert B. And they exposed him to a bunch of different stimuli, such as, fuzzy white rabbit, masks, a monkey mask, I believe is what it was, fuzzy creatures, stuff like that, toys mostly. And every time they would expose him to the white rabbit, they would ring a very loud gong or play a very loud sound to purposefully scare him and try to see if
they could make him scared of rabbits.
Yeah, if they could just basically condition him to be afraid of this object. And what ended up happening is this child ended up becoming afraid of pretty much anything furry or white and fuzzy, to the point where I think it was Rosalind or maybe it was Dr. Watson, one of them had a fur jacket, and the baby would instantly start crying when he would see this object. Even it just got to the point where they didn't have to make the loud sound to scare him. After a while, he just became...
He associated that furry with fear.
Yeah, exactly. That little thing with fear. And this lasted quite a long time, and his mother never knew that this was going on. He was basically taken from his daycare and experimented on without her knowledge. From what I've read, it was without her knowledge. I'm not 100% sure how accurate that was, but a lot of the consensus was she didn't exactly know what was going on when they were experimenting on him. So this test was not really done all that ethically. I mean, they never really developed a system to kind of identify his reactions to what was going on. They just kind of went with it and relied on their own objective observations.
It seems pretty unethical.
It is, because it wasn't conducted very well in the first place. So when all this stuff began happening, they had no real means of accurately, recording it. But I mean, it's a really famous psychology experiment, and it's taught in pretty much every psychology class from what I've read. It is one of the things that they teach you. I don't know if it's a don't do this type of thing or this is what happens when you do this type of thing. I'm really not sure how it's taught, but in my opinion, it's not cool.
Don't experiment on children.
Don't experiment on children? That's really screwed up. And I mean, it took them about 7 years, but they did eventually identify this little boy. I'm not going to go into his identity. If you want to find that out, you can Google it yourself, but I'm not going to. The poor child was born with hydrocephaly, so he had swelling in his brain. And by the time they found out who he actually was, the little boy had died. He was born with it, and it was a pre-existing condition. So I don't know if these doctors knew about it or if they didn't. I don't know. You got to think. I mean, hydrocephaly, it's painful.
Yeah.
Swelling of the brain, and then you're introducing loud auditory bangs next to his ears to purposefully scare him.
That's not a good combination.
No, they basically just exploited this kid for their own experiment. And for what? What did that prove? That you can teach people to be afraid of things? I'm pretty sure if you tell anybody something enough times, they're going to be afraid of it.
So fear is learned.
Fear can be learned. I mean, some things you're just inherently afraid of. But if you think about it, I mean, what are all those nursery rhymes and all those fables that we were all taught as children? I mean, what did they do?
Invoke fear.
Yeah. Like the little boy who cried wolf. He lied so many times that when he actually was in danger, nobody came.
Well, fear is also a part of evolution. You're naturally afraid of things that are going to hurt you.
Naturally, yeah. But, I mean, if you think about it, those little quokkas or however you pronounce those things, they're not afraid of anything because they don't have any natural
Enemies.
Or,
Quokkas.
yeah, I don't know how to pronounce that.
If you don't know what that is, it's a furry little rodent native to some island that I'm not familiar with, and they have no natural enemies, and they will run up and hug you.
They're really sweet and they're really cute, and if they're just fun to look at on the internet.
Yeah.
That's a good pastime, just looking at quokkas hugging people and smiling, because they're really photogenic too.
They like to take selfies.
They do. But fear, I mean, you think back to all those old fables and all those old tales, and they teach you, don't lie, don't talk to strangers. And then you've got all these, like, weird things that happen, throughout the decades, like when John Wayne Gacy was a thing. Now everybody's afraid of clowns. Not everybody. I don't like clowns. But, I mean, if you think about it, his day job was a clown.
Yeah.
And he killed a lot of people. I think the actual counts in the 30s. Because they identified like four people.
Wow.
4 remains recently. In the past couple of years, they finally identified 4 of the remains that were buried under his house. But now, whenever you think clown, you think John Wayne Gacy or It, which is also terrifying. A little thing hiding in the sewers. Ugh. But, I mean, we all know fear is inherently learned, so I don't know why they felt the need to test this on a small child. I mean, if you tell a kid, don't run in the street, you're going to get run over by a car enough times, they're not going to run in the street because they're afraid of getting hit by a car. That's just kind of how it works. So I don't know why we even needed to experiment with that in the first place, because that's just how it is.
Yeah.
But this whole experiment was just messed up from top to bottom. The poor baby. I didn't want to get too much into it. Just wanted to relay a little bit of the story. If you want to know more about it, you can read it online. But just a little bit of knowledge on it is just enough to make your skin crawl, because it's just so screwed up, everything that happened. That poor baby, and the fact that he had a medical condition that probably skewed the results. I mean, if you think about it, probably did. But also just made it worse for the poor little guy.
Yeah.
I mean, your head's already hurting because you have swelling in your brain, and then you've got these assholes ringing bells and making loud sounds in your face all the time to make you afraid of a fuzzy bunny, a white fuzzy bunny. I think he became afraid of anything that was white. So, yeah, it's just...
But that'll wrap up this video. It was a short one, and
short but sweet.
yeah. Well,
Well,
I don't know about sweet.
not sweet. Short but screwed up.
But anyway, thanks for joining us, and if you have any ideas or want us to do anything, make sure you leave a comment and like and subscribe. Thanks.
Bye.